Hello everyone. Today we're going to be going over USACO 2018 December contest, and the problem for today is called mixing milk. So this is actually a really easy problem. Um, the actual solution part of the program can be done in around 20 lines. And so let's actually go ahead and read the problem. So there's a bunch of junk here. They explain it in a like pretty verbosely, but the main idea of the I guess the story is that there are three cows, right? Bessie, Elsie, and Mildred, and he wants to mix this milk, right? Hence the name mixing milk. And so what he does is if he has three buckets, he pours the milk from bucket one into bucket two to bucket three, and three to bucket one, right? And so he does one to two, two to three, right? Three to one. He does that 100 times. And so we want to find out how much milk is in each bucket after mixing all the milk, right? And so obviously 100 times is a lot, right? And I mean, simulating that with a computer, we can just use a for loop, and it's not that hard. But there's actually an easier way to do it, which I'll show you in a bit. But first, let's look at the input and output format. So the first line is going to have C1 and M1. And so basically C1 is the capacity of the bucket, of the first bucket, right? And then M1 is the amount of milk in it. And then this is the capacity for the second bucket and the amount of milk in the second bucket and so on, right? For the third bucket, same thing. And then what we need to print out is after doing those pour operations 100 times, we need to figure out how much milk is in each bucket. Okay, so in this case, in bucket one, there's zero, there's no milk. In bucket two, there's 10 milk. And in bucket three, there is 2 milk. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward, right? In the explanation, it says that the initial state of the buckets is three, four, and five, right? And then after we pour bucket one into bucket two, there is 7 milk here. And this is unchanged, right? We didn't do anything to this. And then once we pour seven into the third bucket, right, we have 12. And notice how this just barely reaches the capacity. So pretend like the bucket is completely full for bucket three right now. And then it gets a little confusing at three a little bit to program at least, but in our eyes it's pretty self-explanatory. We pour as much milk as we can into bucket one from bucket three, and so because bucket one has a capacity of 10, we can pour 10 milk units into bucket one, but we keep two here because obviously we don't want to lose any milk, we don't want to overflow, so we just pour 10 milk here. And then, right, we just do that over and over. So we'll pour the 10 milk we had into bucket two, and then we'll pour it into bucket three. And notice the pattern. It's repeating. So if you see this right here, you'll see that 0012 happens twice. And let me actually switch to a diagram just to simulate the first 10 pours that you're going to see. So I actually forgot to mention, if you look at the last line of the explanation, it says explicitly that the last three states then repeat in a cycle. And that's what you're seeing here. So we have the zeroth pour, right? This is just the initial state of each bucket. And then this is just after, I guess, like every pour operation. And so you just see the milk moving through the buckets, and it just keeps these last three states just keep looping, right? So if we were to simulate this 100 times, right, then we know that we would just, have these repeating over and over and over until 100, okay? And if you use just simple math, then you know that at the very end, right, because this ends at a 10 right here, right, we know that the 100 is going to end in the same way, right, the same state with the 0, 10, and 2, okay? But we see that the fourth operation is also the same, right? It has a 0, 10, and 2 as well. And so this is actually really good news for us because it means that all we need to do is just go until the fourth pour operation. Because if it loops over and over and over again, what's the point of just, repeating it? And so all we're going to do is we're just going to pour until the fourth iteration, and then we're going to get that, and we're just going to return it as our answer. And so this is another simulation problem, and it's actually the easier than the problem I went over before. And so without any further ado, let's actually get started on the programming part. Okay, so as you can see, right, I already have some code written out here. And so all this is it's just some pretty self-explanatory stuff. I have two static static variables that are integer arrays called C and M, right? This is going to be the input that I take in, right? So it's going to be the capacity and the milk amount of each bucket. It's going to be an array that holds that thing for every bucket, right? So it's going to hold the capacity and the milk amount for bucket 1, 2, and 3. And then here I have my buffered reader and my print writer, which are going to help me to read in file input and write file output. And then I set those up here. And you might be wondering why I have a scanner here. And I just, whenever I have errors, right, I just use the scanner to be able to switch to system input quickly, and so that I can debug, right, in the console. And then here I'm just calling the initialize and solve methods, right? You'll know that if you've watched my videos previously, then you'll know that the init method is just initializing all the variables, taking in the input, and the solve method is actually doing the solving. And so the init method, um, what we do here is we're going to initialize the arrays, and then we're going to go through a for loop that runs 3 times, and we're just going to take in the capacity and the milk 3 times, right, for all 3 buckets. So let's move on to the solve method. We're actually going to need a helper method here, right? We're going to use a helper method because if you think about it, the pour operations are just the same with different bucket numbers. And so like pouring from bucket 1 to bucket 2 is the same operation and the same logic that we use when we pour from bucket 2 to bucket 3. Right, so we're going to make a static void mix, right? We're going to make a helper method here. And we need to pass in two parameters, which are int a and int b. And so a and b are going to help us help the program know which bucket we're transferring milk from. Okay, and so the mix method is actually the hardest part of the program, so we're gonna worry about it later. We just have it set it up. So let's actually mix our milk now. So we have mix 0 and 1. So this is gonna mix the milk in the first bucket to the second bucket, right? It's gonna transfer that. And then we're just gonna do this 4 times, right? Obviously with different buckets. So this is gonna be 1 to 2. This is gonna be 2 to 0. And then this is gonna be 0 to 1 all over again. Okay. And so if you're confused as to why this is, just you can just rewatch the portion where I draw it out and I explain it. If not, then we'll move on. And all we're going to do now is print out the milk quantity, right? So it's going to be M0, right? Because remember, we have all our milk quantities in an array. And so this is going to print out our first milk quantity for the first bucket. This is going to print out the milk quantity for the second bucket. And this is going to print it out for the third bucket. Okay. And so once we've done that, we can move on to our mix method, right? So let's say that when we mix A and B, right, but we're going to just refer to them as bucket A and bucket B from now on. Let's say that when we combine bucket A's milk and bucket B's milk, that it is less than the capacity of bucket B's milk, right? So it does not overflow. Then it's actually pretty simple. So the bucket B will now contain bucket A and bucket B's milk, while bucket A will just be 0. Okay, and so the reason why this is it's just because I forgot M there, but the reason why this is if it doesn't overflow, right? Then we're just gonna dump everything we have in bucket A to bucket B. And so that's if we don't overflow, it's pretty straightforward. However, if we do, it's a little bit tricky. So let's say that we do overflow, right? The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say for bucket A is now going to be equal to bucket A's milk plus bucket B's milk minus the capacity of B, okay? And so you might be wondering Now, why are we doing this, right? And so let's say that we have a large amount of milk, right? What's going to happen is bucket A is going to hold the excess while bucket B is going to be like filled to the brim. Like it's going to be at capacity. So in order to see how much excess milk we have, we just get everything that we have subtracted by the capacity of B, and we just have our excess right there, right? It's pretty easy when you think about it. And so the next step is obviously you can guess what the next step is. It's just to put the milk of B, bucket B at capacity. Okay. And that's really all there is to it. Oh, and one more thing, we have to switch this from 3 to 2, right? In order to reference the third bucket, we have to use the minus 2. And now we can submit our program. So it should get all of the test cases correct, and it does. And so yeah, that is mixing milk. It's one of the easier problems in my opinion. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, you guys can feel free to leave them in the comments. If you're watching this on the day of, happy 4th of July, and I will see you guys in the next video.